YouTube, what is going on? Today we're back with another video. I do want to let you know this video is going to really go over a bunch of end game calculations, and it is going to include story spoilers. So if you have not finished the story and you don't want to know what you obtain, please don't watch this video. If you do not care about story spoilers, let's go, baby. You know, we're actually going over Mr. Pokkee's videos. JIYAN is not the best DPS Wuthering Waves CN tier list 1.0. So let's see what the CN community has to say about the meta. I did upload a video of what characters I think you should be building, and I break down their kits, their forte circuits, and how they work, some rotation, some team comps. So go check that out. But with that being said, let's get right into this
video. And today we are finally going to talking about the CN version 1.0 tier list. It is going to be from the same video that we have discussed in the last video, which was a team building guide. It has over 1.3 million views on Bilibili. So without further ado, let's get into today's content. Subscribe! So before we get into today's content, I do want to stress one thing. The tier list, it is not representative, or rather it is not a conclusive thing where everyone in tier 2 or tier 3 is just unusable. And this is also considering the fact that you do understand how team building works in...
Bro, you could use anyone you want, man. Pokkee's 100% right. You could literally make, if you want to make a Sanhua DPS, do it. You want to make Arrow Rover DPS, do it. You could do whatever. Please. Before you go into this video, before you go into any video I make, know that whatever the question is, it can work. Will some synergies not line up with maybe intros to outros skills? Yes, but if you want to use Sanhua and then you want to use someone like, I don't know, Tauchi and then like Danja, I don't know. I mean, like anything can work. There obviously are going to be more optimal options, but it could still work. So that being said, play the game how you want to play it. Before we get into this is going to be super duper hardcore, really try hard meta stuff. If you see something in here and you're like, oh wow, my favorite character is B tier. I really like them. Still use them. Just use them. You know what I'm saying?
It doesn't matter if you just slap on like 3 main DPS and slap on one team from tier 0, then it's still not going to perform well because you do need to understand how team building. So I highly recommend you guys to first check out the team building video, as well as all the previous guys, the beginning guys, all the guys. I made a lot of content Wuthering Waves so far, and then after all those, come back and watch this tier list video again to get a more comprehensive understanding. So with that out of the way, this is going to be the CN version 1.0 tier list as of the current public release, 23rd of May.
Okay, this is interesting. So supports, sub DPS, DPS, Encore, JIYAN, Kalkaro, Yinglang, Chixia over Donjin? No, I don't believe that. No, really? Wait, hold on.
2024 version 1.0. So in the main DPS category, we have Encore at tier 0, as well as JIYAN, sub DPS tier 0 as Sanhua, and Verena is gonna be our tier 0 support. JIYAN over here, it is gonna be with signature light cone. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. Without signature light cone, the highest damaging main DPS in a release is going to be Encore at 29,500 per second. Right, without signature like JIYAN's damage falls off a goddamn cliff, dropping to 24,900 without signature like which is still slightly above Calchero at.
This is what I spoke about in quite a few other videos where I said there really aren't too many great broadswords. Obviously JIYAN's is his best in slot, but it also just does an ungodly amount of damage and gives him such great passives that without it, it is a little bit, it is a fall off, but it could still work. You know, 3.1 to 2.49 is not the worst thing ever. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, Encore being at 2.9 base is very surprising, and it kind of makes me want to switch my focus from Leng Yang to Encore.
22,300, and this is going to be 20,800 for Ling Yang. And then tier 2 main DPS, we're going to have Chixia at 1.76 as well as Danjing at 1.59 as main DPS. I'm going to talk about the criteria a little bit, but I'm just going to briefly go through what are the tiers so far. And then Sanhua is going to be tier 0 over here. Then tier 1 is going to be Modify. He does need JIYAN, and then this is going to be Danjing. He does need a main DPS Havoc, right? So Havoc main DPS, Danjing works exceptionally well as the secondary Havoc DPS with our main DPS Havoc, right? And then this is going to be slightly better than a Jianxing, who does need to pair up with Calchero, and then Chiusui Auto is gonna need to pair up with JIYAN. Unfortunately, because Modify fundamentally performs better with JIYAN than Auto, then Modify is gonna be a better support than Auto for this tier 1. And then tier 2 is gonna be
Mortefi is I think is going to be the best sub DPS in the game for a lot of people. Obviously, right now it says Sanhua up here is ranked higher, but I think the Mortefi Farina combination is going to be a staple of this game. So sidebar, I again, even looking at this right now, like seeing them that they're only in tier 1 I just believe that they're going to be that well and synergize even more. But we'll see. Maybe I'm wrong. You know, this is based off of numbers, right? So the numbers don't lie. But also, I don't know the type of testing they were doing. But I just don't see how this homie is not like up there in the sub DPS with Verena, unless it's going based off of strictly certain team comps. So we'll see.
Taoqi, which is gonna be the defensive sub DPS, and finally we do have our support slash sustain. Verena is gonna be our best in slot. Bai is gonna be our next best in slot, and then this Jianxing is in a very weird spot where you are basically a shooter plus a little bit of additional buffs and crowd control, so it doesn't really pair as well as the normal traditional support slash thing, because her supportive ability is not as high. And then finally we have the final role, which is going to be Yang Yang, Xuanwu, as well as our Spectral MC, right? They didn't include Havoc MC here. I think it's due to spoilers, so they didn't include Havoc MC. But if I were to guess, Havoc MC as a main DPS is probably going to play somewhere in tier 1, because Havoc MC surprisingly
it's pretty valid,
been able to deal a considerable amount.
Havoc MC with sub DPS Donjon is actually fucking busted. So sidebar, again, Donjon could be a really great sub DPS, as we see, might even be better as a sub DPS. But yeah, no, Havoc MC is a problem.
Damage. I'm gonna be talking about Havoc MC in the future, but we'll just talk about it next time. So before we continue, I know you guys are probably like, why the fuck is Encore at tier insane in nuclear? So I'm just gonna go through the criteria they met for this tier list. So tier 0. Extremely strong core main DPS, fares well with every single team, as well as Chongnianbao is basically like for your resonance energy, you can charge up very, very fast. Tier 1, slightly lower DPS output, and then for your sub DPS, you can still pair them, but it is more limited, right? So for Sanhua, she basically pairs up very well with almost every single main TPS we have as of version 1.0, because basic attack and damage deepen is just a very, very universal outro skill that everyone can use. That's why she's gonna be tier 0. So the tier 1s doesn't mean that they're bad, it's just that they're a little bit more restrictive. But if you do have, like for example, JIYAN, and you have Modify or Sanhua, you run him with Modify to get an even better performance than pairing up with Sanhua, right? So it is just a little bit more niche, doesn't mean that they're worse in that sense, right? So, and then the last for our support is just...
That makes sense though, because Modify, his outro skill is buffing heavy attacks, and not everyone uses heavy attacks the same way someone like JIYAN or Kaltra would use. So that makes sense. That makes sense.
Their energy regeneration is not that high. So Verena has a very, very quick ultimate, right? Resonance energy, very, very fast. You can spam it out. So Bai maybe it's a little bit slower, a little bit slower. So that's going to be the determining factor for our support slash sustain category. So notes, every single number, especially for the main DPS here, is going to be through their server testing, and it does align with the public server's current data and current math and damage numbers, right? So this is updated to the public live version of Wuthering Waves. And then from a team building perspective, you need to consider a team's performance and not specifically a unit performance, which is a little bit similar to like Honkai Star Rail tier list. You don't really consider a unit to be tier 1 or tier 2. You need to consider how well their team performs. So for example, DOT team right now in Honkai Star Rail is extremely universal, pretty easy to build, and you can clear both MOC and pure vision, which is right. DOT team comp, they tend to perform quite well, right? Hyper carry, it performs very well, but you probably need a little bit more investment. Your Inhibitor Rune, your Scylla, your Daughter ratio, you do need a little bit more investment, and it's a little bit more restrictive. And then Aircraft just being Aircraft because she's completely broken, right? So you do need to consider this from a team perspective instead of an individual unit perspective, right? Do not, right? Tier 1, do not only look at tier 0. Okay, they are tier 0, therefore they're the best. I only want to get them, right? Do not look at only tier 0. Consider the team building capabilities, right? Every single unit here is gonna be at 0 Eidolons, and that's gonna be there. So if you have additional Eidolons for a unit, especially for 4 stars, their ranking can change very, very drastically. For example, Danjing's Eidolons, they're absolutely ridiculous. Her E4 provides crit rate, her E1 and E2 provides even more damage, and her E6 is a team-wide attack buff. So if you have a very high Eidolon Danjing, I wouldn't be surprised.
I do have an RC Donjon. That's all I'm saying. I'm just throwing it out there. You know, I don't want
to. Her even placing quite well in the main DPS category, because based on testings, an E6 Danjing single target main DPS, assuming perfect rotations, no downtime, it is one of, if not the highest burst in the entire game. E6, right? So that's gonna be that. In the future tier lists, they would consider 4 stars with additional Eidolons. So for now, they're all currently considered Eidolon 0. So just take them into consideration. Havoc MC, right? Havoc MC is not included yet. And then this is gonna be the average damage, right? So this is quite important. Theoretical and actual performance in battle it's impossible to be exactly the same, right? Because in a theoretical situation, your main DPS damage output will assume a perfect rotation at exactly the right time against the right enemy. In a real world battle, if you think Encore is tier 0 and she does like this amount of damage, you are probably not even gonna get close to this amount of damage. And
bro, the thing, theory versus practical is such a massive deal for the fact that the game is not as straightforward in combat as Genshin. There are so many more layers and features and kind of things that make the depth a lot bigger, or a lot more, a lot more deep. Trying to get the perfect rotation every single time, eventually, obviously, as more time goes by and like people get more experience, it'll happen. But again, this is 100% accurate. You're not going in with Encore and hitting like 29k off rip, or JIYAN with his burst, with his signature weapon when his burst for 31k. It's not happening. You have to funnel people properly. You have to do the setups. You have to time your concerto energy. You're moving with a lot of moving parts. You're working with a lot of moving parts and a lot of elements, which is why, not that I'm not a fan of tier list for a game like this, because I think tier lists are important to kind of just give the super basic, most really math-wise breakdown. But as Pokkee said earlier, you got to take some of this with a grain of salt. You know what I mean? Again, someone like Mortefi now, Sanhua is going to work with 1,000,000 units, but Mortefi is going to work so much better with JIYAN, and then the Mortefi-Verena combo on top of JIYAN is probably going to be the best team in the game right now, and I think would out-damage a Encore DPS team, in my opinion. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. We'll see. But like, there's just certain buffs and certain team compositions and echo builds that I think it's early, man. I think it's early for this. But we'll see. Let's see.
And this is assuming like max out gears and everything, right? So right now, for example, my Calchero, every single basic here and there is probably around 300 to 400 damage. So it is nowhere near 29,000 damage per second. So this is like end game stats, right? So theory is always going to be different from reality. If you can pilot a character better than another unit, then always use it as your #1 priority when selecting a main DPS. If you cannot play Encore, if you don't know how range attack works.
If you can make Ling Yang work, do them. Because Encore stuff, again, Encore cannot parry unless you're doing a plunging attack or you're in her ultimate stance, right? I don't have the skill for Encore. I'm just going to say it. I'm going to get her, especially after looking at this, because now I want to do my own testing. But I don't have the skill for her. And so, but if you can make someone like Ling Yang work, and you like that in-air combos, and you make it more efficient, you pair that with Sanhua, and you pair that with Verena, you're going to do a bunch of DPS, and maybe you're not hitting the 29,000 mark that Encore is hitting, but if you're more comfortable with it and you're more consistent, it is better consistently hit 20,000 damage, which is using that as a baseline, just, obviously not going to hit 20k every time, but with your rotations and everything, if you can consistently hit 20k more, as opposed to only hitting 29k, maybe one rotation out of every 5 with Encore, go with Ling Yang. You know what I mean? So, again, all love to Pokkee. He said it multiple times. Take this stuff with a grain of salt, man.
If you can't dodge, if you're just going to get hit half the time, then there's no point picking Encore, right? Same thing for Calchero, for Ling Yang. If you really like Ling Yang, right, and you can use Ling Yang, then he's definitely going to be a lot more valuable than Encore for your team. Important thing to note is, if we take AoE, grouping AoE monsters into consideration, when it comes to AoE content, there are some characters in this tier list that have an advantage. Namely, JIYAN. Right. His ultimate has this innate grouping ability, right? He can group up all the units together and lump them with one and just damage them all. And none other units here have this ability of the self group up. So an issue that I have noticed with Calchero is that when you're using his burst, his skills, it is very narrow, right? His range is very, very narrow. His ultimate is all basic attacks. So if the enemies are not grouped, you will have a more difficult time clearing AoE content with Calchero compared to JIYAN, right? So there are some things that can't really be described over here. So if you want to take into grouping into consideration, then JIYAN's rating will go up drastically, because he's the only DPS we have right now that has an innate self-grouping for AoE content, right? So that's going to be that. For Sing,
you could run someone like Johnshin with Calchero, but I think that's just a massive overall DPS loss, especially if you're not running someone like Mortefi or when Yinlin drops, which is really a great point. Again, that's why JIYAN, I think, is just overall the best pick for any DPS right now, due to the fact that he could really sustain himself. He does good damage. Although we don't have the best broadswords in the game, he does CC. He does very well damage, and he's just straight up easy. You know what I mean? It's hard to fuck up with JIYAN. It really is. Kokoro, you know, Encore, Ling Yang, they're much more harder to use in my opinion.
Single target DPS output, then JIYAN is gonna fall off because JIYAN's key ability, his key strength is not single target burst, right? His main usage is using his ultimate to group up waves of enemy and disperse them as in. So if you're gonna be using single target content, then expect his rating to fall off a little bit. So that is pretty much the gist of how this tier list is gonna look like. Yeah, for our version 1.0 tier list. I'm not gonna say whether it's accurate, I'm not gonna say whether it's inaccurate because I'm just here to translate and just tell you guys exactly what to think. This is a tier list that has been pretty much one of the most popular tier lists that we have in BDB right now. So going to the more in-depth calculations, I'm gonna keep this as brief as possible. This is every single main DPS calculations, so I'm just gonna keep it very brief because I'm pretty sure you guys won't even want to know all that anyways. So this is gonna be the criteria of 10 double crit, 2 attack percentage, and 2 damage percentage. So this is gonna be the substats. This is gonna be 3 cost main DPS. 3 cost main stat is always gonna be the elemental damage. 4 cost is always gonna be double crit. 1 cost is always gonna be attack. Right? So these are the criteria. So JIYAN Encore, JIYAN with signature light cone, Encore with I believe this is the 5-star weapon. Then JIYAN with no signature light cone. Then this is gonna be Calchero, and then all this is gonna be the damage and the other stuff. So now let's just go into the thing, right? So Encore with Yingling's signature weapon, which obviously we cannot get right now. I think this is the only number we need to care about. In 23 seconds, she managed to deal 34,473. And then if we were to take a look at Encore with a standard weapon, then Encore's damage drops from 34,000 to roughly 29,000 within 23 seconds, right? So that's gonna be a roughly 5,000 damage drop off, something along these lines. So not too big of a deal. Roughly slightly more than 10%. Yep, it's not that bad. Then there's gonna be JIYAN with his signature weapon and JIYAN with the standard weapon. JIYAN 23 seconds, 31,451 with the signature or with the normal weapon. It's gonna be 24,000. So you can see that this.
Yeah, bro, that is a drop, man. That is a drop. I don't know if maybe they put in like really mid broadswords just to try and let me get this off of Mr. Pokkee. I don't know if they put in really mid broadswords just to kind of like sell the banner. I'm not mad about it or anything. I'm not at all. But that is a pretty big drop off. Damn, that's a lot. But yeah, the broadswords are just really not that great, bro. They're really not cooking.
Damage drop off for JIYAN with or without a signature weapon is gonna be quite big. So I guess the main issue is just because the normal weapon right now we have for our DPS is tied to energy regeneration. Whereas JIYAN's signature weapon is very heavily tied to offensive stats, your attack and all that kind of stuff, right? So in terms of raw damage output, JIYAN without signature weapon is gonna fall off by a much more considerable amount compared to Encore with the signature weapon slash Yingling's signature weapon, right? So that's gonna be that. That's gonna be JIYAN. And now moving to Calchero. Calchero's signature weapon, this is gonna be a teammate, right? So this is Calchero with signature weapon with Yingling, right? Then this is gonna be 27,201, and then this is gonna be 25,635. What's
I assume his signature weapon is JIYAN's broadsword. That's what I'm thinking.
the difference here? Okay, check. They made a little typo here. This is not with Yingling. This is with Sanhua. So this is the difference with Calchero running with Yingling versus running with Sanhua. So if we were to run Sanhua instead of Yingling, the damage drops off by actually not a very impactful amount. It is only 1.6k-ish, changing from Yingling to Sanhua. So the idea that you really want to run Yingling with Calchero, it is not that necessary compared to, because if you just run Sanhua here, the damage drop off is not that much, right? So if you really like Calchero and you're thinking, should I even pull for Yingling because if I really like Calchero, rest assured his performance is not going to be that impacted when you do pair him up with Sanhua instead of Yingling, right? So that's going to be for Calchero. Then jump.
Wow, what? That's kind of crazy. I don't know. That's if this is all true, and when she comes out and it's only a small drop off by that, that's rough, man. I mean, I think Yinlin is still going to be a great unit overall just because of, her outro skill, the way her mechanics works where she has the follow-up coordinated attacks when she's off field. But that's crazy if that is 100% accurate. Again, I'm not here to dispute anything. I'm here to just see what they're saying and get their perspective of the meta, and my perspective is clearly a bit different, right? Again, also the game is only out a few days, so things could change. But I haven't really seen anything here that has kind of made me feel like the video that we put out saying what characters you should build. I don't really think anything is off from there. I think we've hit the nail on the head on everything so far. To be very honest with you, other than the fact that I assumed you would get a much bigger buff with Yinlin, but I mean, again, you know, if you don't, you don't, and that's amazing, and that could be an easy skip unit for a lot of people, and that honestly, that's not really a bad thing. That is not a bad thing if it's, you know, if you have a main DPS like Calchero and their damage potential is locked behind a limited 5-star, that would kind of suck. But if you can go with someone like Sanhua, who is free, you get them 5 days after logging in, and they're only dropping off by a couple thousand damage, I don't see a problem. I think that honestly get people to really skip. So, interesting. Very, very interesting. Not bad at all, and really more positive for the player. I just didn't expect that. But okay, we're going to keep it pushing.
Jumping into Calchero, I guess this is a separate rotation. So this is the third hit, right? So this is going to be the separate rotation. The damage drops off by a little bit. I guess this is not that important, but this is going to be a separate rotation with Sanhua without Yingling. And then jumping into Calchero with Jianxing. So this is the reason why I think the previous video I mentioned why... wait, not the previous... Is it this video? I've lost track of time, right? I basically said something about Jianxing's best in slot is with Calchero, but Calchero's best in slot is not with Jianxing. And this is the reason why. So the damage output over here is going to be 20,504, which is even lower than Calchero with Sanhua, right? So you can see that even though Jianxing, she pairs very well with Calchero pairs even better with Sanhua or Yingling, right? So Jianxing, even though it works, but the damage is going to be falling off by quite a bit as compared to a 4-star sub DPS such as Sanhua, right? So that's going to be that for Calchero. A lot of numbers here. And going into Lingyang, right? Lingyang, there's only a singular map, and this is going to be Yinliang with the signature weapon with Sanhua. Overall damage is going to be roughly 20,812. Okay. Not too bad. So far, all the numbers here, they're all above 20k. The only two instances where we broke 30k in 23 seconds is going to be Encore Yingling's signature weapon and JIYAN with JIYAN's signature weapon, right? These are the only two instances that we broke 30k. Everything else is roughly between the 20 to 30-ish range. You can see that for Lingyang, his damage output from 25 seconds is also at 20,812, so it is not too far off compared to the rest of the class, such as Calchero or even Jianxing, right? So that's going to be that. And then this is going to be a secondary map which shows JIYAN with signature weapon plus auto. The overall damage is still really, really good at 27,433, but it does fall off quite a bit when you pair him up with Mortifei over here. So when you pair with Mortifei, it falls off by roughly 4,000, 5,000-ish. So it shows in this theoretical situation that Mortifei is a better pairing for JIYAN than Auto, right? So Mortifei does more damage than pairing up with Auto. So that's
I misunderstood him. No, Mortifei's definitely... Okay, that makes sense. JIYAN with Auto... So JIYAN with Alto is not as good as JIYAN with Mortefi, but I think we knew that. Although Alto gives you the arrow damage buff, Mortefi's just built different. That homie is just
so it shows in this theoretical situation that Mortifei is a better pairing for JIYAN than Auto. So Mortifei does more damage than pairing up with Auto. So that's gonna be that. And then just gonna be wrapping up last two map over here. Yeah, then overall, okay, this is gonna be Chixia plus Taoqi, no hit, and then this is gonna be Danjing with Mortifei, right? So overall that damage is 70,000, 50,000. So that is roughly the map for the calculations done by the CN content creators with regards to this specific tier list, right? So overall, like I said, theoretical numbers, they are never gonna be accurate compared to real life numbers. It's always gonna be dependent on your pilot, because unless you can nail down this exact rotation, unless you can do everything in perfect timing, right? Sanhua, EQ, Verena, AA, EQQ, jump, AA, right? Unless you can...
also getting all those echoes. You got to get the crit rate, crit damage, all that other stuff based on how the star system echoes work. So that's another thing, obviously.
Nail this down, your in-battle performance is going to be very, very different when it comes to theoretical versus reality, right? So overall, this is going to be the CN tier list for version 1.0. TLDR for the main DPS, Encore has the highest damage outputs out of everyone, assuming the perfect scenario with the perfect team comp. Secondary run-up with signature icon is going to be with JIYAN, and then Calchero is going to be here, Liang is going to be here, then TLD is going to be here. And then for sub DPS, the most universal sub DPS is going to be from Sanhua, because she basically pairs with everyone, right? Almost everybody can run her, and then a little bit more niche is going to be Mortifei, Danjing, and Qiuxing, Jianxing into Qiushui, right? Then all these going to be a little bit more niche, but doesn't mean that they are worse. It's just that this is very, very universal. Same thing for Verena. Verena is the more universal. Bayaj is basically a less substitute, right? Because it's a 4-star, less multipliers, and then the rest of over here is just going to be a little bit more niche overall, right? So with that, we've come to the end of our CN version 1.0 tier.
I think they did Yang Yang dirty, bro. I think they did Yang Yang and Yanwu dirty. They're not bad units. I really think like the energy funneling can really help out, especially with someone like JIYAN who needs energy. but just a lot of characters. Kind of putting them in tier 3. I'm not sure. I could see the Spectro rover, the Arrow rover, the Spectral rover, whichever one. I forget the element off the top of my head. I just woke up. I could see them being in tier 3 100%. I don't think they're a bad unit, but in terms of sub DPS, they're definitely not on the level. I think they're better than Tauchi, but putting them in the support section like that, I don't know. I don't know how I feel about that. I've definitely seen some crazy team comps with him melting characters with the Havoc rover just instantly, like instantaneously melting open world bosses and really helped out with his kit. So I don't know, man. That part I'm not too very fond. That part I'm kind of like, I feel like they might have missed the mark on that. Yeah, and especially Yang Yang. Yang Yang is just a good unit. Like, build your Yang Yang. Build her. She is going to work in a million team comps because her CC and her energy funneling, you know, like that's just amazing. Her intro skill is not the best, and the 2 Forte slots aren't the most crazy overblown thing ever, but she's just so solid and such a standard great character that it makes sense. Obviously she's not going to be on the level of Sanhua or Mortefi, and you should, you know, really focus these characters first, but you know, to me, like, this is a 3rd or 4th priority sub DPS to put. I wouldn't even put her as support, but I guess you could technically because like CC and whatnot. But I was keeping her as sub DPS in my mind. But I don't know. I mean, let's see.
Less multipliers, and then the rest of it over here is just going to be a little bit more niche overall, right? So with that, we've come to the end of our CN version 1.0 tier list as of this current moment, right? If you guys have any further discussions, head over to the comment section or join the Discord, discord.gg/Pokkee's village. We're very active on a daily basis. Want to check out my stream at series.tv for YouTube, I'm streaming every single day. Should you on Discord, so I think this tier list should show that majority of units, they're still relatively balanced. You can definitely use them to clear every single content we have in the game right now. So don't worry about it too much. Even if you get Ling Yang, don't worry about it too much. If you didn't get Kakarot, Kalchero, or if you're gonna be an Encore main, this is the part I'm most surprised. I did not expect Encore to be the pretty much tier 0 DPS, which is insane, right? So maybe this will influence your decision when it comes to pulling. Maybe it will not. Who knows? This is gonna be left up to you, right? Tier lists are always subjective. There's never ever gonna be an objective tier list that is completely accurate. It is always depend on the player, how often you use these units, how comfortable you are using these units. So that's gonna be that. Yeah. All the best for your GM pools, and I'll see you guys next time.
Love you, Pokkee.
Take care.
Thank you, baby. Yeah, man, I like it. The Encore thing really threw me for a loop, and the Yinlin thing really threw me for a loop. Unless she gets some crazy massive buffs, there's no reason for me not to believe the stats that they put there. And I think that really changes the game for a lot of people, including myself. Is do I roll Yinlin? If Kakarot, whatever, if his buffs are not going to be that much more, I don't know, man. I don't know. With that being said, let me know what you think. I love you. Mwah. I'll see you in the next one. It's calling my name. So come on, baby, let's stop.